Moses, a name that is echoed through history, revered by millions. He led the Israelites out of Egypt, stood before Pharaoh with divine authority, parted the Red Sea, and brought down the 10 Commandments from Mount Sinai. His legacy is unparalleled, yet an unsettling mystery lingers in the shadows of history. What happened to his sons? Gershom and Eliezer, the children of one of the greatest prophets to ever walk the earth, seem to have vanished from biblical prominence. Unlike Aaron's descendants, who became priests, or Joshua, who inherited leadership, Moses' sons faded into obscurity. Why? Were they overlooked? Did they fail to rise to the occasion? Or was their absence by divine design? The answers may shock you. This is more than just a historical mystery. It reveals profound truths about divine leadership, fate, and God's ultimate plan. Get ready to uncover the truth behind why Moses' sons were seemingly erased from history. Before we dive in, if you love biblical mysteries and want to explore the hidden depths of Scripture, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's unlock the secrets hidden within the pages of history. The Bible does indeed mention Moses' sons, but only briefly, leaving a puzzling gap in their historical and theological roles. In Exodus 2 verse 22, we learn that Moses named his firstborn Gershom because he was a foreigner in a strange land. This name is deeply symbolic, reflecting Moses' own exile in Midian after fleeing Egypt. Some scholars argue that this sense of foreignness extended to Gershom himself, as he was raised in Midian rather than among the Israelites, potentially contributing to his later obscurity. Eliezer, his second son, is mentioned even less. His name, meaning "my God is my help," carries a significant theological implication, reinforcing the divine protection Moses experienced. Yet the text offers little about Eliezer's role within the Israelite community, leaving his legacy shrouded in mystery. Unlike the sons of other biblical patriarchs who were integral to the continuation of their father's spiritual or national mission, Gershom and Eliezer remain on the fringes of the narrative. One of the most significant events contributing to their diminished presence in Israelite history is Moses' decision to send them away. When God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, he sent his wife Zipporah and their sons back to her father Jethro in Midian, Exodus 4 verse 18 to 20. This separation may have been for their safety given the dangers Moses would face in Egypt, yet it also distanced them from the defining moments of Israel's deliverance. Unlike Aaron's sons, who were with him and witnessed the miraculous plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, and the receiving of the law at Mount Sinai, Moses' sons were absent during these crucial events. The biblical record tells us that they reappeared in the wilderness when Jethro brought them to reunite with Moses, Exodus 18 verse 2 to 6. This moment is notable, as Jethro, a Midianite priest, blessed God for his works and offered sacrifices, reinforcing the deep connections between Moses' family and Midian. However, despite this reunion, Gershom and Eliezer quickly fade from the story once more. The scriptures do not recount their roles, actions, or contributions to the Israelite community, leading to speculation about whether they ever integrated fully into their father's people or remained outsiders in some sense. Unlike Aaron's sons, who played a significant role in Israel's priesthood and were actively involved in temple service, Moses' own children do not re-emerge in major capacities. Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron, were directly involved in Israel's religious structure, either as priests or through their lineage. This striking contrast raises deep theological and historical questions. Were Gershom and Eliezer sidelined by divine design, personal choices, or historical circumstances? Some scholars suggest that their upbringing in Midian under Jethro's influence may have contributed to their limited role in Israelite affairs. Unlike the Levites, who were steeped in the traditions of the Israelite priesthood, Gershom and Eliezer may have lacked the same cultural and religious immersion. The absence of any indication that they served as judges, prophets, or priests further deepens the mystery of their fate. Theories abound regarding why their contributions are virtually absent from the biblical text. Some propose that they failed to distinguish themselves spiritually or politically. Others speculate that their omission serves a greater theological purpose, highlighting that divine leadership is chosen, not inherited. This pattern is echoed throughout the Bible. The younger Jacob is chosen over Esau, David over his older brothers, and Joshua over Moses' own sons. Ultimately, the absence of Gershom and Eliezer in the biblical narrative leaves more questions than answers. Their near erasure serves as a striking contrast to their father's unparalleled legacy, underscoring the profound theme that leadership, priesthood, and divine purpose are not granted by birthright, but by divine calling. Traditionally, in many ancient cultures, the leadership of a family, tribe, or nation would pass from father to son. It would seem logical that Gershom or Eliezer would inherit Moses' mantle. However, God chose Joshua, Moses' devoted assistant, to lead the Israelites into the promised land. Numbers 27 verse 18 to 23. Joshua was not Moses' son, nor even from his tribe, yet he was handpicked due to his unwavering faith and dedication. Unlike Gershom and Eliezer, Joshua had been at Moses' side, witnessing God's miracles, leading battles, and remaining loyal to God's commands. This contrast in devotion suggests that Joshua embodied the qualities required for leadership, whereas Moses' sons did not stand out in the same way. The biblical record does not explicitly state why Gershom and Eliezer were bypassed for leadership, but their absence in crucial moments of Israelite history provides some clues. They were absent from the key events of the Exodus, the giving of the law, and the formative years of the Israelite nation. Unlike Joshua, who fought battles, interceded for the people, and remained close to Moses, Gershom and Eliezer remained in the background. This suggests that they may not have demonstrated the level of faith, leadership, or courage required for such a monumental role. Additionally, Moses himself never advocated for his sons to take over his position. In contrast, he recognized Joshua's qualifications and sought God's guidance in appointing him as his successor. This decision underscores the biblical theme that leadership is not hereditary, but granted by divine calling. Some speculate that their Midianite heritage may have also played a role in their exclusion. While Moses married Zipporah, a Midianite woman, the Israelite community may have viewed their lineage as an obstacle to leadership. In contrast, Joshua, a member of the tribe of Ephraim, was fully integrated into the Israelite people and their traditions. The absence of Gershom and Eliezer in the biblical record of leadership transitions could indicate that they either lacked the qualities needed for the immense task ahead, or that divine intervention selected Joshua instead. Were they uninterested? Did they fail to rise to the occasion? Or were they simply not part of God's ordained plan? Although Gershom and Eliezer are largely absent from biblical narratives, their descendants do resurface, albeit in minor roles. The most notable mention is Gershom's son, Shebuel, who served as a treasurer during King David's reign. 1 Chronicles 26 verse 24. This was a significant position of responsibility in the kingdom, entrusted with overseeing sacred financial matters, likely related to the temple treasury. While this role reflects a level of prominence, it was far from the type of spiritual or national leadership held by the descendants of Aaron or David. Eliezer's lineage through his son Rehabiah is noted to have been particularly numerous. 1 Chronicles 23 verse 17. This suggests that while Moses' direct sons may not have assumed key leadership positions, their family line continued to flourish and integrate into Israelite society. However, the absence of any further details regarding their roles in governance, priesthood, or prophetic work suggests that they remained outside the central power structures of ancient Israel. The lack of any recorded significant contributions by Moses' descendants contrasts sharply with Aaron's lineage, which became the hereditary priesthood of Israel. The sons of Aaron were established as the mediators between God and the people, a lineage that continued unbroken through the Levitical priesthood. Meanwhile, the descendants of Moses seem to have faded into relative obscurity. The biblical text does not ascribe any priestly, prophetic, or royal functions to them, reinforcing the notion that Moses' legacy was tied not to his bloodline, but to the laws and teachings he delivered. Some scholars propose that this discrepancy is intentional and aligns with a broader theological theme in the Bible, that leadership and divine favor are not guaranteed by birthright, but by individual faithfulness and God's sovereign will. Joshua, not a son of Moses, was chosen to lead Israel because of his faith and dedication. Similarly, David, the youngest son of Jesse, was chosen over his older brothers to become king. This recurring pattern emphasizes that God's choices are not based on human expectations but on divine wisdom. While Shebuel's role as treasurer and Rehabiah's numerous descendants suggest that Moses' lineage endured, it never rose to the prominence of the Davidic or Levitical lines. Instead, Moses' true legacy was not in his descendants, but in the Torah, the divine law given to Israel, which shaped the faith and identity of the Jewish people for generations to come. Many scholars and theologians have pondered why Moses' sons faded into the background despite their father's unparalleled influence. Theories abound regarding their relative obscurity, ranging from personal shortcomings to divine selection that favored other figures more suited for leadership. The lack of direct biblical accounts regarding Gershom and Eliezer leaves much room for speculation, but a few prevailing theories attempt to explain their diminished role. One common theory suggests that Gershom and Eliezer simply did not rise to the occasion, failing to exhibit the qualities necessary for leadership. The Bible often emphasizes that divine leadership is not granted by birthright, but by faithfulness, obedience, and personal calling. Figures like David, who was chosen over his older brothers, and Joshua, who was not a direct descendant of Moses, reinforce this theme. Perhaps Gershom and Eliezer did not demonstrate the unwavering faith, courage, and dedication needed for such a monumental task. Unlike Joshua, who spent years serving under Moses and proving his worth, there is no record of Moses' sons participating in key battles, making crucial decisions, or playing active roles in guiding the Israelite people. Another prominent theory revolves around their Midianite heritage. Gershom and Eliezer were the sons of Zipporah, a Midianite woman, which may have created a cultural and social divide between them and the Israelite tribes. The Midianites had a complex relationship with Israel throughout biblical history, sometimes allies, sometimes enemies. While Jethro, Zipporah's father, was portrayed as a wise and righteous man who assisted Moses in governing the Israelites, Exodus 18, Midian as a whole was not always viewed favorably. The later conflict between Israel and Midian, Numbers 25, demonstrates the tensions between these groups. It is possible that, because of their Midianite background, Gershom and Eliezer were seen as outsiders, making their leadership within the Israelite nation less feasible. Another plausible reason for their historical obscurity is that they were simply overshadowed by more prominent figures. Joshua, Moses' faithful assistant, proved himself time and again, demonstrating unwavering commitment to God and the people of Israel. He led the army in battle, scouted the promised land, and remained devoted to God's instructions even when others faltered, Numbers 14 verse 6-9. By contrast, there are no recorded instances of Gershom or Eliezer exhibiting such actions. Additionally, Aaron and his descendants were granted the priestly lineage, securing their long-lasting prominence in Israelite religious life. The priesthood was a central institution in Israel, and Aaron's sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, carried forth this legacy, becoming integral to Israelite worship. With the priesthood firmly in Aaron's line and national leadership given to Joshua, there was little room for Moses' sons to claim an influential role. Some scholars speculate that Gershom and Eliezer, having spent much of their early lives in Midian, may not have fully integrated into the Israelite community. Unlike the children of other Israelite leaders, they were raised apart from the people during crucial formative years. This distance may have hindered their ability to connect with the Israelites, making them less likely to be accepted as future leaders. If they were seen as more aligned with Midianite culture and traditions, the Israelites may have been reluctant to follow them. One of the most telling factors in their obscurity is their absence from major biblical events. The Bible records countless moments where God appointed leaders, prophets, and judges, often detailing their personal journeys and struggles. Yet Gershom and Eliezer remain conspicuously absent from significant milestones in Israel's history. They are not present during Moses' confrontations with Pharaoh. They do not appear during the receiving of the law on Mount Sinai, and they do not emerge as tribal leaders in the wilderness wanderings. Their absence from these defining moments strongly suggests that they did not play a role in shaping Israel's destiny. Some scholars argue that the obscurity of Moses' sons serves a theological purpose. Moses was chosen not to establish a dynastic rule, but to deliver the law and lead the Israelites to the Promised Land. Unlike King David, whose lineage was crucial for messianic prophecy, Moses' role was not to create a hereditary leadership, but to act as God's appointed servant. In this view, the lack of emphasis on Moses' descendants is intentional. It reinforces the idea that leadership is based on divine selection rather than inheritance. This aligns with other instances in the Bible where leadership transitions did not follow family lines. Instead, God often appointed leaders based on their faithfulness rather than their parentage. Joshua's succession over Moses' sons exemplifies this principle, highlighting the theme that true spiritual leadership is not about genealogy, but about obedience and devotion to God. Jewish midrashic literature offers additional insights that attempt to explain the absence of Gershom and Eliezer from prominent leadership roles in Israel's history. Some midrashic interpretations suggest that their obscurity stemmed from their failure to fully dedicate themselves to Torah study and leadership responsibilities. Unlike other significant biblical figures, such as Joshua or King David, who devoted themselves to divine instruction and service, Moses' sons did not appear to demonstrate the same level of commitment. One midrashic commentary proposes that Gershom and Eliezer may have been raised with an affinity toward Midianite culture rather than being fully immersed in the traditions of Israel, since they spent much of their formative years in Midian under the influence of Jethro, their grandfather. It is speculated that they did not undergo the rigorous Torah instruction and spiritual training that characterized Israel's future leaders. As a result, they may not have been seen as fitting successors to Moses, especially in a society that placed immense value on adherence to God's commandments and spiritual discipline. Another perspective from the Midrash suggests that Gershom and Eliezer may have lacked the necessary zeal for spiritual leadership. This interpretation aligns with broader biblical themes, where leadership is granted not by birthright but through faith, obedience, and dedication. The Torah is replete with examples of individuals who were chosen by God based on their personal virtues rather than their lineage. For example, Saul lost his kingship to David due to disobedience, despite being Israel's first king. Similarly, Aaron's grandson, Phinehas, secured a covenant of peace with God through his bold and zealous action, whereas Gershom and Eliezer remained absent from key events that shaped Israel's destiny. Some rabbinic sources also highlight a particular incident in Exodus 4 verse 24-26, where God sought to kill Moses due to the lack of circumcision of his son. Zipporah, Moses' wife, had to intervene by circumcising their son, which indicates a possible lapse in spiritual observance within Moses' household. This episode suggests that Gershom and Eliezer may not have been raised with the same intensity of religious instruction as other key biblical figures, which could have contributed to their diminished legacy. Furthermore, in Jewish tradition, the study of the Torah was considered a primary responsibility for leaders and scholars. The absence of any mention of Gershom and Eliezer in the context of religious study or instruction reinforces the idea that they may not have actively pursued the spiritual rigor required to lead the Israelite people. This would have placed them in stark contrast to figures like Joshua, who not only assisted Moses, but also demonstrated a fervent dedication to the divine commandments. The Midrash ultimately suggests that Moses' sons were not predestined for leadership due to their own choices or circumstances. Unlike their father, who was divinely chosen to lead despite his initial reluctance, they were not endowed with the same divine calling. Their story serves as a reminder that spiritual leadership is not merely inherited, but must be actively cultivated through faith, dedication, and unwavering commitment to God's will. This interpretation aligns with the broader biblical pattern, where individuals who rise to prominence are those who show deep devotion and an eagerness to serve God's purposes. Gershom and Eliezer, while undoubtedly part of Moses' lineage, did not leave behind a legacy of spiritual leadership, reinforcing the idea that divine selection is based on individual merit rather than familial ties. One of the most compelling reasons Moses' sons did not take center stage is the lineage of the Messiah. The Bible places immense importance on genealogies, particularly those that lead to Jesus Christ. From the earliest biblical narratives, lineage is a crucial indicator of divine purpose. As seen in God's covenants with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, The Messiah was prophesied to come from the line of David, fulfilling promises made to the patriarchs and reaffirmed through generations of Israelite kings and prophets. Despite Moses' unmatched role as a lawgiver and prophet, his bloodline was not divinely selected to carry the ultimate messianic promise. Instead, God chose the tribe of Judah, through the line of David, to bring forth the future Redeemer. This distinction is critical because biblical leadership and spiritual inheritance were not merely about prominence or accomplishments, but were deeply intertwined with God's sovereign plan for redemption. The book of Genesis lays the foundation for this lineage when Jacob blesses his sons, specifically identifying Judah as the one from whom kingship would emerge. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Genesis 49 verse 10. This prophetic declaration established Judah's descendants as the rightful line of kings, ultimately leading to King David and, through him, to Jesus Christ. Moses, despite his closeness with God, was from the tribe of Levi. The Levites were appointed for priestly service, distinct from the royal line that would rule Israel. The priesthood was an essential function in Israelite society, but it was separate from the Davidic monarchy and the messianic fulfillment. Had Moses' lineage been the chosen one, the messianic expectation would have been tied to the priestly role rather than the kingship, which was not God's intended plan. Instead, Moses' significance lay in his role as the mediator of the law, which pointed forward to the need for a savior but did not establish a dynastic inheritance. Additionally, the genealogy of Jesus presented in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke underscores the divine selection of lineage. Both genealogies trace Christ's descent through David, reinforcing the prophetic fulfillment of the messianic promise. Nowhere in these genealogical records are Moses' descendants mentioned, further indicating that his family line was not meant to play a role in the fulfillment of the coming Messiah. The focus of the biblical narrative remains on those genealogies that directly contribute to God's overarching plan of salvation. Moses' purpose was monumental. He was the deliverer of Israel, the one through whom God revealed his law, and a prophet who spoke to God face to face, Deuteronomy 49 verse 10. However, his descendants were not meant to carry forward the spiritual inheritance that led to Christ. Instead, Moses' legacy was preserved through the Torah, which shaped the spiritual identity of Israel and laid the groundwork for the coming of Jesus. This theological distinction is crucial because it reiterates the biblical theme that divine election is not based on human expectations, but on God's sovereign will. Just as Saul, the first king of Israel, was rejected in favor of David because of his disobedience, so too were many prominent figures in the Bible passed over in favor of those chosen according to God's redemptive plan. Moses' role was to deliver and instruct, but the task of carrying forth the messianic lineage was assigned elsewhere. Moreover, the New Testament reinforces Moses' significance in foreshadowing Christ's mission. Jesus is frequently compared to Moses, particularly in the book of Hebrews, which presents Christ as the greater Moses who mediates a better covenant. Hebrews 3 verse 1-6. Moses' law revealed the need for redemption, but it was Christ who fulfilled that need. This underscores why Moses' descendants were not central to the biblical narrative. They were not the ones appointed to bring about the ultimate act of salvation. Thus, while Moses' sons continued his lineage, their bloodline did not hold the prophetic weight required for the coming of the Messiah. Instead, the Bible directs its attention to the tribe of Judah, the house of David, and ultimately to Jesus, who would fulfill God's plan of redemption for all humanity. The lack of focus on Moses' lineage is not an oversight, but a deliberate theological choice, emphasizing that God's salvation history unfolds according to divine wisdom rather than human hierarchy. Another key event sheds light on why Moses' sons did not inherit leadership: the incident at the burning bush. When God called Moses to lead Israel, Moses hesitated, repeatedly expressing self-doubt and insecurity about his ability to serve as God's chosen deliverer. Exodus 4 verse 10-14. Moses attempted to excuse himself, claiming that he was slow of speech and tongue. Exodus 4 verse 10, an indication of his reluctance to take on such a significant role. Despite God's reassurances that he would be with Moses and give him the words to speak, Moses continued to resist. Ultimately, he pleaded with God to send someone else. Exodus 4 verse 13. This repeated hesitation angered God, prompting him to appoint Aaron, Moses' older brother, as his spokesperson. Aaron's involvement in the mission marked a turning point, not only in Moses' personal journey, but also in the establishment of Israel's spiritual leadership structure. By stepping in as Moses' voice, Aaron took on a role that would solidify his family's legacy in the priesthood. Had Moses fully embraced his role without hesitation, perhaps his sons might have been more prominent in Israel's history. Traditionally, leadership in biblical times often passed from father to son, and it is possible that if Moses had taken full ownership of his calling, Gershom and Eliezer could have played a greater role in Israel's leadership structure. Instead, by allowing Aaron to take on a significant part of the mission, Moses inadvertently shifted the focus of religious leadership to his brother's lineage. This divine decision had lasting consequences. Aaron and his descendants were designated as the priestly class, the Kohanim, responsible for offering sacrifices, maintaining the tabernacle, and later the temple. This role carried immense spiritual authority, ensuring that Aaron's lineage would be central to Israel's worship for generations to come. Meanwhile, Moses' sons, despite being part of a prophetic family, were not granted this same spiritual legacy. Another important aspect to consider is the contrast between Moses' and Aaron's willingness to lead. Whereas Moses hesitated, Aaron stepped into his role with readiness. This willingness may have further cemented God's decision to establish Aaron's family as the priestly line. Throughout the Exodus narrative, Aaron plays a crucial role in facilitating God's miracles, confronting Pharaoh alongside Moses, and leading the Israelites in worship. Exodus 7-12. His active involvement in the nation's early religious structure further reinforced his family's prominence in spiritual matters. Additionally, Moses' role as a leader was fundamentally different from that of a king or priest. While he served as a mediator between God and the Israelites, his position was temporary. He was never intended to establish a hereditary dynasty. Unlike King David, whose descendants were meant to rule Israel, Moses' mission was unique. He was to deliver the Israelites, bring them the law, and prepare them for the promised land. His calling was not to build a ruling lineage, but to act as God's chosen servant for a specific purpose. In contrast, Aaron's role as high priest became hereditary, ensuring that his sons and their descendants would continue serving in the temple for generations. The priesthood of Aaron was later reinforced by divine command. In Numbers 18, God formally declared that Aaron and his descendants would be the ones to minister before him, securing their role in Israelite society permanently. Meanwhile, Moses' sons are scarcely mentioned beyond their early references, emphasizing how the structure of Israel's religious leadership had shifted entirely to Aaron's family line. Furthermore, the absence of Gershom and Eliezer in major biblical events suggests that they did not take on significant leadership roles even outside of the priesthood. While their descendants are mentioned in later periods, they never held positions comparable to those of Aaron's lineage, or even the judges, prophets, or kings who would later guide Israel. Ultimately, Moses' reluctance at the burning bush set a series of events into motion that would shape Israelite history. His hesitation led to Aaron's rise in prominence, which in turn established the priestly lineage outside of Moses' direct descendants. This moment serves as a powerful reminder that leadership in the Bible is often determined not by lineage, but by willingness, obedience, and divine selection. The erasure of Moses' sons from biblical prominence is not accidental, but part of a divine pattern. Leadership and spiritual inheritance in the Bible are not based on mere bloodline, but on faithfulness, service, and divine selection. Gershom and Eliezer may have lived lives of faith, but they were not chosen for the monumental roles that figures like Joshua, Aaron, and David played. Their story serves as a reminder that God's plans transcend human expectations. Even the sons of the greatest prophet were not guaranteed a place in history unless they were called and prepared for it. In the end, Moses' true legacy was not through his sons, but through the law he delivered, the people he led, and the divine will he fulfilled. We have unraveled a forgotten chapter in history, one that raises deeper questions about leadership, faith, and destiny. Moses' sons may have been born to a prophet, but their absence reminds us of a powerful truth. God does not choose leaders based on lineage, but on faith and obedience. Gershom and Eliezer were not erased by accident. Their story reveals the divine mystery of God's plan. Now we turn the question to you. Why do you think Gershom and Eliezer were left out of history? Were they unworthy, overshadowed, or was it simply God's design? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this deep dive into biblical mysteries, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video so more people can uncover these hidden truths. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Stay blessed, and we'll see you in the next video.